Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. This is an open meeting which is being recorded. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? No, thank you. We have two late apologies due to sickness, maybe something slightly stronger than I've got, from Councillor Ali and Councillor Harvey. But luckily, unfortunately, we are quorate, so we can continue with today's programme. The Chief Executive will be joining us for the improvement item. There'll be a number of people joining remotely, and some of that is to do with precautions regarding possible contact with COVID. Okay. Just moving on now to item 2, which is the Chair's announcements. Members will be aware an additional meeting has been programmed now for the 13th of January, and this will have only 2 agenda items, and this will be the revisions to the Constitution and the procurement policy. Members have been notified of the new date. Have we had responses to show that we'll be quorate? Okay, so I'd encourage you to either let Joe know that you'll be there, or if not, to encourage to arrange for your substitute. I think the reason we're having this extra meeting is part of the tidal wave of work associated with the improvement programme, with the Constitution going through a thorough review. The second announcement is that most of the skills audits have now been returned and 2 surveys have been submitted. We will touch on some of your responses during the work programme, which is our main substantive item today, apart from improvement. And I will also ask officers to bring to the March meeting a report reviewing the committee and how to develop, on the basis of our skills, any changes we need or improvements we need to make going forward. Keeping an eye on the time, because one of the officers is only able to be with us in 10 past. Jodie's online. Okay. So now we move on to item 3, which are the minutes of the last meeting and the action log. Are there any comments, or are we content with the minutes as a record? Do we have a proposer? Thank you. If we could move on to the action list. That's fine. One or two open items which response advice against them. And I'll pick up later when we come to the improvement discussion on the improvement report. I'll ask where we stand as in our relationship to the improvement board, which is not yet formed. Are there any other comments on the action list, or are we happy to move on? Okay, thank you. So we now move on to item 4, which is the work programme. As we agreed last time, I put this at the front of the agenda rather than at the back of the agenda. So we give it, we're not thinking of where we're going next when we discuss it. Work has been done by officers to revamp the approach and look at its incompleteness. And Jodie Townsend, I think, is online now to introduce the paper. Jodie?
Good morning, committee. Can you all hear me well?
Yes, that looks fine, Jodie. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. So good morning. So at the previous meeting of the committee, there was an update provided on improvement, which touched on the role of this committee in the improvement journey, and also in the response to the review of governance. One of the outcomes of that conversation was a request from the committee that I go away and come back with a work programme proposal that reflects the discussed improvement role from that last meeting, and also includes within it some elements that will allow the committee to debate, discuss, and hopefully respond to the review of governance. So the work program proposal is attached to Appendix A. What we've done is we've broken down the key responsibilities of the committee under key headers, so you can get a better focus of those elements you are undertaking. It incorporates topics that you'd already decided you wanted to include in this municipal year, such as whistleblowing. It incorporates the majority of the review of governance recommendations as items in the work programme, and it also sort of sets out the improvement role, which you discussed at the last meeting, which was, of course, to see the improvement highlight report and reports moving forward to board, and obviously seek assurance on the content of those reports. So the Appendix A is the proposal. I would like to just highlight that the report itself does also suggest adding on the 27th of January, as part of your improvement conversation, a bit of a focus on performance management framework, which is obviously very, very key to what we're doing. And that will now hopefully start to develop at a bit of pace. There are some interdependencies with that piece of work, with workstream A, which is the corporate plan, and workstream B, the governance framework, which have needed to advance before that performance management framework piece could really get going. So that document in front of you, it will obviously be a live document subject to amend and change throughout the year. Also, would just like to add, it is of course up to you as you, the committee, to decide what your work programme is going to be. This is obviously a proposed work programme following on from that request from the last meeting for you to debate and discuss. So happy to answer any questions, and I'll hand over you as a committee to discuss the content.
Today, sorry. Thank you, Jodie. And I appreciate the work officers have done to produce this paper today. Are there any comments, observations, recommendations from colleagues? Graham.
I've just got a couple of very minor things whilst others are thinking. On page 20, I think we have the climate change working group reporting twice, once in December, hopefully, then once in January, and presumably it's not intended to do both. And on the statement of the accounts in January, will it be the final 2021-22 annual governance statement, or will it be the final 2020-21 statement and accounts? Because I get rather confused as to which years we deal with when.
Thank you, Graham. On the climate change, I should have mentioned that. I deferred that till the next meeting, so that's a fossil. On the accounts question, I look for advice.
It should be the 21-22.
Could you?
Sorry.
Are you getting as bad as me?
Yeah. Yes, it should be the 2021-22 annual governance statement.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? The internal auditor, Dan?
I appreciate Jodie's comments. Obviously, it will be a live document, but we have been asked just to bring the internal audit annual report for 21-22 back to the 27th of January meeting. So that will need to be incorporated on there. And for your 31st of March meeting, we covered this in our pre-meeting. We will have the internal audit strategy for 23-24, hopefully at that March meeting as well.
Thank you. Any other comments? Well, I've got a couple. One relates to paragraph 3.6 about the improvement journey, which we'll also come back to later on the improvement plan. I'm not quite sure how we feel about that the committee is to assure itself and the board that the improvement framework will satisfy London and our external auditor friends. I'm not convinced that's in our competence, the will. And that, yes, we need to keep a close eye on it. When we get to the improvement journey paper, we need to understand more about the role of the improvement board, because when we've had earlier discussions on this, the improvement board has been the source that we're looking to give us confidence in this appropriateness of the actions that have been put in place. So could we have another form of words rather than will? I think we can do I have any offers on wording?
How about is likely to? So assure itself. I'm not sure about the use of the word assure, to be honest, but assure itself and the board that the framework is likely to satisfy DLUC.
Any other comments on that, or do we think that keeps us enough wiggle room?
I think, yeah, it depends how into the long grass we want to go, doesn't it? But you, yeah, on the next point down, you can even say, you know, where assure itself that it's on, the improvement is on track. Well, we hope it is, and we're doing all that we can. But you know, I guess that's you know, time's going to tell us that one, isn't it? I guess.
Okay, can we? That's very helpful. I mean, the bit on track is absolutely what we can assure ourselves with. The first bit, I think, is more about to satisfy ourselves that the work in hand addresses the points raised by the external auditor. Satisfactorily addresses the points, to assess that, because which is what we're going to come to later. Because we can't be in the. Solomon sits at the end of the table and won't give his opinion, because that's exactly right from an external audit point of view. And having spoke to London, they won't give their opinion. So how the hell can we think what's going on in their minds? Can we work on that wording a bit, officers, to give us a better clarity about our remit?
Well, I quite like David's suggestion. It is likely to, but equally, I would look at Solomon and ask: is it likely that this is going to meet your expectations? And not, you might want to check with him now, but on the basis that Mark comes to every meeting, I think it's appropriate that periodically he does indicate whether or not we're broadly on track and it is likely to meet their comments, expectations.
As we come, can we hold this, rerun it again when we come to the improvement paper, but with those thoughts firmly in mind? Okay, thank you. I just always uncomfortable when things I can't do I've put on our agenda. Okay. I had another couple of things. If we go to the development program, which is on page 21 of 246. There's an item there about hearing panel training during December. I'm not aware of any dates. We do need it. Do we have a timeline for this month? Edwina, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can. Yes, we can.
Yes. Yes. We don't have a date yet, but we're going to be conversing for dates very soon. I'm just checking with the committee for availability. So we're hoping to do that possibly in the next 2 weeks.
It's going to be, you haven't yet canvassed people for a date.
Sorry, sorry, I missed that.
Have you actually asked for a date yet, Edwina, or are you about to?
No, about to.
Okay, well, I don't know about other people's diaries, but is that a feasible question to ask this close to the festive season? I look to members to. Okay, well, yes, please ask as soon as possible. Maybe do a doodle poll, offer some dates rather than just one. But I think you have to take a practical view when you get the answers regarding diaries before Christmas.
Okay.
And that sort of segues into my other comment about development sessions. There's no doubt about it that we regularly need to meet to focus on areas where we need to improve our skills or need to be done in a more timely fashion. So what I've asked officers to do in regard to next year is to book development sessions at the same time as we book the meeting dates, so that we've got them in our diaries. And if they work doesn't materialise, it's easier to cancel them than it is to find short notice new appointments. Are members comfortable with that as an approach? Okay, thank you. Any other comments from you, Jodie, before we move on?
Yeah, the only additional comment I would add is that the work programme proposals have been pulled together at the same time as us doing a similar exercise with the overview and scrutiny function. But obviously that's focused on their role in regards to improvement and response to the review of governance. So we should have two approaches through the two regulatory committees that complement each other moving forward.
Okay, thank you. So having considered the work programme, we're asked to adopt it for the remainder of the of this civic year, and I sense we're agreed on that. Thank you. Okay, if we could move on to item 5, which is the improvement programme. Now, the Chief Executive should be listening in because he was going to join us for this item at my request, bearing in mind he's got a few other things to do. Is Gordon there? Are we able to communicate with him? Can somebody send him a... I did ask him earlier this morning to be on, keep an eye open from 10:20 onwards, and I've done very well. We're at 10:19.
Yeah, I will send him a Teams message now.
Okay, thank you. And Angela, are we?
Yes, Chair. I was going to suggest, do you want me to start giving you an update whilst the Chief Executive joins for any specific input from him, but also any questions that the committee might have of him?
Yes, I think, Angela, that would be appropriate. But I was particularly anxious that we will have the Chief Executive available to ask questions. And if he joins us a few minutes after you started, that would be equally satisfactory. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. You will be aware from the papers that you have received that the CA board in October both received and noted the improvement plan update report, the highlight report. and that has been shared with you as part of your papers and has already been shared, Chair. The focus for today is to review that highlight report. I'll leave the tone in terms of what you will assure yourself on, but in terms of external observers, but also to assure that the improvement is on track. You'll be aware, and this might be a matter, Chair, that the committee wants to talk to the Chief Exec about. You'll be aware and have a copy of that a letter has been sent to the external auditor by the Chief Exec and in response to issues that were raised back in June. And also to share with the committee that regular meetings do take place with DULUC. The Chief Executive and I have met with senior colleagues from DULUC over the last 10 days, have shared with them the report that went to board, the external auditor's letter, and various other documents with regards to the IIB that I will come on to. And I have a further meeting with more junior colleagues of DULUC next week following the board. So regular contact is in place to hopefully assure and receive feedback from DULUC with regards to the progress on the improvement report. Turning to the IIB, and Chair, you raised a point in terms of its status and where it is at. I am able to confirm that the IIB has been established, that the membership has been shared with all key stakeholders, and that an induction day has been arranged in mid-January. This is due to diary commitments, and the Chair is very keen that the board is able to attend in person, and therefore the mid-January date reflects this. The meeting is to be held in Peterborough, and IIB members will meet with CA board members to understand the context of the improvement journey and also confirm and agree its focus going forward. Leading up to the induction day, the Chair has already met with the Deputy Mayor, has been in regular contact with the Chief Executive and has met LGA colleagues. Lord Kerslake has also arranged a meeting with senior colleagues in DULUC in the new year. And we are ensuring that all board members have all necessary documents, reports, so they can be appraised and have sight of the progress that we are on. So Chair, I don't know if at that time Gordon is present or if there is any questions relating to that before we move on to the specific highlight report and any questions that you have got.
Do members want to comment about the improvement board in any way?
Chairman, I might have missed it, but I don't know who's on the board, and if we are to work with them in any way, it'd be useful to know.
Have we circulated the list of names on the board to the committee?
Chair, my understanding was that was happened. If committee members haven't got that, apologies. I will, through Democratic Services, ensure that that is sent out by the end of today.
It might just be that I missed it, Chairman. I'm just saying I don't recall.
I will ensure it's sent out, Chair.
Thank you, Angela. I don't recollect, but maybe Graham?
I don't recollect either. I don't think we've also seen the letter that the Chief Executive sent to EY.
No, it's at the foot of this paper.
I beg your pardon. Okay, thank you.
It doesn't come out, before we get into the guts of the paper, it doesn't come out clearly in there, or at least I didn't read it that way, that we will be getting output from the improvement board to help us meet our obligations. What's the intention, Angela? Or Gordon? Welcome, Gordon.
Hi there. Angela, you pick that up? Yep.
No, I will, of course. Thank you. Chair, as shared, the board will meet in mid-January. It will, of course, give a view and observations to the board, to the CA board, to yourselves and external observers on the progress against the improvement plan and indeed the broader journey. But as yet it has not met. They are already receiving reports, but as yet, as the improvement board has not met, they've not formally reviewed it as a group to feed back.
Okay. Well, I think it would be, there shouldn't be any doubt that we look to the board to provide us with output which will enable the audit committee to assure itself that the improvement journey is on track and to get advice on their opinion on to the extent that the improvement work is likely to satisfy the needs of the external auditor and London.
I can feed that back to the chair.
And I think, whilst I've been thinking since the previous item, I think the words likely are the ones we should use. And I'm grateful for members of that input. Okay, thanks very much. Are you going to take us, there's quite a lot in your paper. Are you going to bring it to life for us and what we should have in our minds?
Chair, the highlight report set out the overview observations from the Chief Exec. It sets out the key deliverables for October and the key risks and mitigations that have set out. Chair, I was hoping that you might have questions, specific questions that you wanted to share rather than me necessarily going through the report in detail.
Well, it wasn't so much the detail, but any particular elements you want to get into our minds.
Chair, I'm very happy to do that. This is a new approach for the combined authority, and it is part of the improvement journey itself for the combined authority to be able to set out what it intends to do and the progress that it is making. So I would share, Chair, that this is the first highlight report. We would very much welcome your observation on whether it does indeed give you a level, I won't use the word assurance, but it gives you the detail that you need to have an understanding of the progress that has been made. And in the highlight report, which is the appended, it sets out clearly for each of the key themes what the outcomes are for each of those themes, what the achievements have been this period, and what is effectively planned over the next period, which is over the next month. Chair, the key focus over this last period has very much been around the work around theme A, workstream A, which is regarding the overarching strategy for the remainder of the mayoral term, because Jodie has already shared earlier in this meeting, in this committee, that is something that will then drive a range of other activities. So good progress has been made with regards to the mapping of the approved strategies, engagement with the mayor with regards to his policy agenda priorities, and work on the future operating principles and the values and behaviours. And indeed, Chair, the committee should note there is a staff session in person next week in Huntingdon with regards to working with staff to confirm the values and behaviours that will then go on to a discussion with members the following week en route to CA board in January, which will agree, hopefully, both the vision priorities and also the values and behaviours. So progress has been made in that. The other area where possibly, and Jodie has alluded to this, where more progress is required is with regards to workstream E, which is the development of or implement an organisation for today's performance. That, Chair, is rated as amber because, as Jodie has set out already, there are elements in both workstream A with regards vision priorities, govern arrangements which are set out in workstream B that will prompt and inform the focus and approach that is required for performance. So, Chair, we believe as officers, as the executive team, that with regards to what we set out to do, that we are on progress to deliver on that. The report that went and the highlight report to board earlier this week, members or the board noted and did not express any concerns. In fact, thanked officers for the progress that is being made. So, Chair, I'd wish to leave it there to give time. I'm conscious of the Chief Exec's availability, but also of members to ask specific questions that they might have.
Thank you, Angela. That's very helpful in bringing it to life in that way. Colleagues, do we have questions either for Angela as lead or for the Chief Executive who's taken the time to join us?
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Angela. Before I raise a specific, just as a matter of course, really, where we've got an agenda pack, can we please, and where we're asked to comment on a specific report, rather than having to jump through hoops to find it through the link, can we have it actually in the agenda pack? Because clearly I have to close down one document to open up another one. Maybe it's because my system's antiquated, but I would find it much easier if it was all in the agenda pack. And you were talking about Workstream A. There are a couple of strategies mentioned in Workstream A that were to be drafted by the end of November. The straight question is, have they been drafted?
First of all, Chair, this report is for October. In terms of the specific reference to strategies, the vision and priorities strategy has been drafted. It's just going through a number of reviews by different stakeholder groups, but that is on track in terms of where it needs to be, and work has been going on with regards to the drafting of that in November.
Thank you.
Colleagues, other comments or questions? We're specifically asked as to whether we feel that this approach meets what we think is appropriate in regard to, if we go to paragraph 3.7 on page 23, the highlight report to ensure it is fit for purpose. Does it provide the required programme level of oversight? Does it provide the level of the oversight of the risks, performance, and the next steps?
Sorry, Chair, I don't want to hog this, but as I read it, and as Angela said, it was, this was a report for October. So to me, it came across very much, this is largely work in progress. I think probably the next report will be, give us more chance. The approach seemed right to me, but I think because it was early, the way I read it, because it was early days, it was very much, we are doing this, but it's very much still work in progress.
Chair.
Yes, good, please.
Yeah, just a sort of couple of overview comments. I think the council that spoke last is right. The October report is, is the first month of reporting against the plan. One of the issues will be how, over what period this plan gets extended. So what's set out here is in many senses the first things we need to do. It's not an attempt to have a comprehensive description of all the elements that would need to be tackled to see a comprehensive reset at the combined authority. Some of those issues, some of the cultural issues, will take quite a long time. But they need to be built around practices and behaviours and people's willingness to make adjustments, and those can't be legislated for. That becomes a process. But that initial set of work, which is really for months rather than a very long time. I mean, I imagine Angela said at the beginning, but clearly this has been shared with officials at DLAC and BAYS, and of course, the external auditor has been able to spend wonderful hours watching the committee debating these things as well. And certainly the consistent message back, and so has the chair of the improvement board obviously got the copies of this material and a lot more. And certainly to the extent that, and I wouldn't want to overplay this, but you know, there is no one from that group coming back and saying, goodness, you've really missed something here. I think the comment broadly is, yeah, this seems about the right range of things for the beginning of the process. As Angela said, there is, in some senses, a little bit of a sequence rather than everything at once. So the work on strategy, purpose, the role of the combined authority and how it goes about its business is a bit of a driver for many other elements. And that's what a lot of effort's been on. But there's a lot of this work that is actually about officer processes as well. It's not all about members and the specific meetings of the board. And in terms of officer processes, I think one of the issues that is really, really important, and I'm not sure we've described it quite sufficiently overtly in the paperwork, but it's not just about the processes inside the local authority machine. The reality is that the combined authority will be most effective when its work is intertwined with the work of local councils in the patch. And that goes from devising plans and policies to delivery. The combined authority is part of a system. It's not separate. It doesn't sit above. It's not a council of another sort. It's a different sort of a body, and everyone will get most benefit if the officers in particular do the preparatory work that allows the combined authority at board level to have the right information and to be able to make available choices. And that work in the background is really quite important. Now it's described here, but it's actually incredibly important to success. And I think it does say in the paper, but one of the ways we've started that process is that each of the 6 strands of work have a sponsoring chief executive from one of the local councils, where they're briefed on what goes on, and some of them are really quite involved in what goes on, giving a steer, and in most cases feeding back to the other council chief executives. So the strategy document, for instance, the lead chief exec is the Cambridge City Council chief exec, Robert Pollock. He's seen that document as it's been drafted. He's shared it and consulted with the other council chief executives on that. And earlier this week, we had another discussion with all of the chief executives together about some adjustments and positioning for that document. So that's a really important part of the process, that we're not sitting in CPCA towers trying to reinvent this somewhere. This is very much an open exercise about deliberately seeking participation, involvement, whether that's challenge or support, and moving it along in that sense. I can just fill in the question about who's on the Independent Improvement Board. I think you all talked long enough for me just to bring names to memory, or at least for half of them. I don't remember the councillors' names, but and I'm sure, I mean, they've been in circulation, they're public, they've been in local government press and so on. Sorry if we haven't sent them to you directly, but the chair of the independent board is Lord Kerslake, who's the vice president of the LGA, ex-head of the Home Civil Service, ex-permanent secretary, and before that, When he was a lowly person, he was just a council chief executive in several different places. But I mean, he's enormously experienced and helpful in this arena, and has been involved in local government style improvement activity before. You might remember he led a review into the governance at Birmingham City Council 3 or 4 years ago, which led to forms of intervention. So we have 3 people who are, in one sense, absolutely not politicians, and then we have 3 politicians. The second non-politician is Julie Spence. So we were quite keen, and Lord Kerslake was quite keen that there was someone who had local connections and understood more about issues in the CPC area. And I'm sure most of you remember that Julie Spence was the Chief Constable in Cambridgeshire some years ago, and continues to be active in public affairs locally. The third is Anne Shaw, who is a director at, so she's employed by the West Midlands Combined Authority, but is a director of the Transport Operation and Authority. And she is looking to help us in the way that, I mean, in our patch, we need to see much better integration of around planning for transport and how delivery follows that. And she's volunteered to actively work with some of our teams across our organizations to begin to think about the journey over a number of years, not just the short-term putting things right journey. And then we have 3 council leaders. Now, these have been identified through the Local Government Association. One, and I can't bring their names to mind, but there is one from
Gordon, I've got those names. Do you want me to share those? Is that helpful?
Let me describe them.
Okay.
So the important thing is they are all council leaders or have been council leaders. They have all been involved or are involved in mayoral combined authorities of one description or another around the country. They are incredibly experienced individuals. There's a spread of parties. So Labour, Conservative and Lib Dem. The leader of London Borough of Sutton, the leader of South Gloucestershire, which is part of the West of England Combined Authority, and the leader from Manchester, which I don't remember, is a Labour leader who was on the Combined Authority, but is currently the leader of the minority group in her council, but that's the council that switches back and forward. I mean, when we were discussing with the Local Government Association about the sorts of politicians that would be helpful, in my view, it needed to be, because all of our board are leaders of councils. This isn't like a peer review in the normal sense of the word, but the Local Government Association have done a good job in this respect. They've found people who are very experienced from different parties. But in the same way as a peer review happens, I think we should expect those individuals to be asking questions and offering support to particularly councillors of the same tribe, if you like, which is helpful. The last thing for me to say, just on this general part, Chair, is that October was the first month we're going. We're now into another month of work, which is quite substantial. But I think all external observers, and me too, would say there is a big test coming up. It's one thing getting on with the work in detail, and people are engaging with that. But I think by the time we get to the end of January, we will have had the board meeting, which is adopts the strategy document, which has to have the discussion about the budget and medium-term financial strategy, which inevitably involves some areas of political contention. So the test will be can those discussions happen in a constructive and reasonable way, where agreement may not be achievable between everyone around the table, but the debate needs to be well supported and conducted well. And the first phase of the Constitution will also be coming to that board. So that's a pretty crunch time for, I think, everyone to be able to judge about the depth of progress that might be able to make by then. So that's a test for all those involved. It's not just a test for officers, it's a test for board members and councils about how they want their organisation to run, and whether they want to send the signals to not just to government, but now that we're going out to market for several director posts, about whether potential candidates to come and work in this organisation will see that they're coming to an organisation that is serious about its improvement journey and therefore want to join. Because I think if people see that, we will get good candidates. If they see it looks messy, I don't think we'll get good candidates. So it's a big practical test all around. Sorry, that was a bit longer than I meant, John, but once I got going in my soapbox, it was difficult to stop me. Yeah.
No, that's fine. But that was very, very helpful, I think. You had a question, so, or a comment.
I just think within this whole framework, we've got to hang it on the first key theme of the improvement plan, which is to clarify the scale of the political ambition. And I think that speaks to what Gordon just said. It actually speaks to what he said in his letter to the external auditor, which is, as a political body, this organisation needs to decide which direction it's going in. Does it want to be small government with low budgets and low spending? Is that the right way to serve the people of this region? Or does it want to use its powers to bring in extra funding for the benefit of the people we serve? And that's the point about political ambition. I think the development, it goes on to say, a development of an overarching strategy to include the defining purpose and role of the CPCA, and in particular where the CPCA can add value. And those are quite tough questions to answer, because we can frame it from the original prospectus that was the founding of the combined authority, and the targets that were envisaged in the prospectus, in the business plan, or we can look at the reality of the budgets that are now available to us, and whether we're just going to stick within this small amount of funding, or whether we're going to have the ambition to go out and compete for funding in that bidding environment that the government is putting in front of the combined authorities. And then there's the next test, which is, what's the focus? Where can the CPCA add value? And a lot of that value can actually be in its convening power. It doesn't actually need money. It's about bringing parties together to make sure that they combine their collective assets and resources for better public value outcomes. And so I want to see the answer to this key theme. What is the scale of the political ambition? What's the overarching strategy? What's the defining purpose? And where are we going to add most value? And then everything else and all the other key themes then fall under that overarching strategy, and we can be more clearly defined. So that's what we need, and we need to see that. I don't see it as an open process because I'm unsighted on what's been going on. Are we going to be served up with something that's effectively oven ready and we've had no participation or ownership of? So I think I'd like to see what's going on.
Thank you. I mean, I think we have to be careful about our knitting and somebody else's knitting. Most of that was persuasive, but not our knitting. Our job as the audit committee is to make sure that they reach a decision. We're not the group that decides whether the decision is good or bad. That's not an audit committee's function. Are there any other comments? I've got a couple.
On the paper as a whole, Chairman, or specifically on the
No,
improvement
on the whole. I mean, there's such an enormous amount here.
I had one specific, and it's on page 26 of 246, and the additional drivers. And the fifth bullet point refers to the devolution deal requiring the establishment of an education committee, and we're asked whether we think this should be addressed. First question that came to my mind was, why was it in the devolution deal in the first place? And is there still a valid reason to have an education committee, in which case it does need to be addressed? Or have times changed and there's not a valid reason, in which case it doesn't need to be addressed? But without that sort of information, I personally can't say one way or the other whether we should have an education committee.
No, but I think we can say as an audit committee, if the devolution deal requires one, it should either be delivered or the deal should be altered, because that's a governance issue. And I think that's something which I interpret this as being realised by CPCA.
Yeah, if it's helpful, I can provide some detail on that point.
Please, Jody.
So the additional drivers highlighted in the report cover all the things we are looking to address when delivering proposals for workstream B, outcomes B1 to 5, which all relate to our proposed governance arrangements and making sure that they are best placed and fit for purpose for delivering our corporate plan. And of course, our role and responsibility as a combined authority. That piece of work has involved obviously reviewing the devolution deal along with lots of other documents to make sure that our governance arrangements do pick up all the things that we were intended to pick up originally when the CA was set up. We picked out that there is a reference in there to an education committee. We have therefore had conversations with those conversations have mainly been with the county and Peterborough City, who of course have the education responsibilities, to say this is in the Devo deal. How best do you see is the best way to take this forward? And those conversations are now ongoing with those two councils and with our Director of Skills, Fliss. And that element will be picked up in the proposals that come forward in our governance arrangements. That will be referenced to you in your meeting in January on the Constitution and in the papers going to board in January. The initial feedback from those two councils is that they see value in what is being proposed, but on a officer advisory level to provide additional advice and guidance to our Skills and Employment Committee, rather than there to be a separate education committee. But those conversations are still ongoing, and they will include the Regional Schools Commission as well in those conversations.
Thank you, Jody. I've got a few comments based on what people have said and the input from the Chief Executive and Angela. Many questions which were asked in this paper about whether this improvement report meets our expectations. I think it's going in the right direction, but I think we would welcome feedback after the improvement board itself has had time to consider this as to whether they also support the sense of direction. I think I have a view about timelines and important factors, the crunch points which were mentioned. It doesn't seem to me that there's a clarity about the timelines, or we're in a period of special management. If I use a military analogy, is an exit strategy. What is the exit strategy to get back to business as normal? And when is enough improvement to allow that to happen? That's not easy to answer, but I think it needs to be thought about. We have some milestones that we can see. That we will get an audit opinion from the external auditor in probably March. So that seems a timeline message. Is there enough to be done? Can the combined authority do enough to satisfy that key external observer that the improvement journey has reached the right place? And can one make a judgment at any stage or some indication of when we reach that we're now normal? Well, there's still a lot to be done because it'll never all be. We're always improving. None of that is apparent. And I don't ask for an answer now, but it just seems to me that getting some sort of timeline and end game is important in focusing the improvement process. And then my other comment from what's been said of my own view is that the two key issues are the strategy, what are we all about, which is a political one, and the other one is behaviour. And on page 24, I think we should record, I believe, that the committee welcomes the intention to have a values and behaviour session later this month, because we won't get these consensuses and this clarity of purpose without behaviours which show a team at all levels working together. And I have had some personal indications that some of these behavioural problems haven't yet been recognised in all quarters. So I really welcome in our next report that the committee gets a return on the crunch items and insight and any thinking that the improvement journey can give us on when we move from dealing with something in an interim and emergency way to business as normal. I don't know whether the Chief Executive or Angela think that's reasonable or unreasonable.
It's very reasonable to want to be normal, I think. I mean, Angela might want to see more on assessments of how we know would make a difference, because it was a conversation we had with Lord Kerslake about a month ago. But it will be, so Angela maybe say a bit more about that, but it will be a mixture of hard and soft things. I mean, on the hard side are some of the actions that you see in the 6 themes, you know, things that we need to pursue, we need to produce documents, we need to change practices, that needs to be documented, and it needs to be consistent, systematic and regular. We need to do hard things like making a transition to permanent appointments for the senior team. There's clearly a timeline to that, but we are at the point next week of going out to advert for 2 permanent posts for the senior team. There'll be a sort of transition to be managed over the next 6 to 9 months, I think, as a part of that. But Angela, do you want to, I mean, given that this was an explicit conversation we had with Lord Kerslake, do you want to say a bit more about that?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yes, the timeline, and I take your comments, and we will reflect those in the next meeting in January. The elements of focus that Gordon has shared are for the next 3 months. There is more to do. And in the conversation with Lord Kerslake, we picked up and looked at what was already set out in the board report in October, which was very much about what people would see and feel was different. So about perceptions potentially with regards to external observers, and how following the end of January, as has already been said, the end of January is a really important milestone with regards to some of the nuts and bolts, but also strategic direction. So with Lord Kerslake, we touched on and picked up some of the elements that were set out in Gordon's original report in October with regards to how people might perceive that things have changed. And therefore, the focus over January will be how in early February, we will address and test out some of those perceptions, both with the improvement board, but also external observers, such as the external auditor. Have we passed the test of, this is what we set out to do, and this is where we are at, with some really key tight timeline focus for the next two months, but also about then what is that next phase, and do we understand as a combined authority what that broader transformation and change needs to be. I don't think we will ever be a normal state, but it is about getting these matters in place that we have set out to do, and have we achieved that by the end of January.
Thank you very much, Angela. And thank you for undertaking to reflect some further thoughts at for our paper at our next meeting. I sense that for now the committee goes with all the proposals in the paper. No, sorry, one more thing before I sum up.
So in your synthesis, Chair, you referred to the importance of strategy, which I commented on earlier, and values and behaviours, which I think transforms into culture. And the external auditors on record saying that culture takes longer time to develop within an organisation, and that is something that will endure beyond the, if you like, the exit point. But the one, and you quite rightly raised transition to exit, but within all of that, and it's referred to in the report, is this golden thread, this coordination between all the different themes. And given that there are so many different work groups going on, the challenge is going to be about literally putting the thread through all of those different working groups and arrangements so that they add up to a greater whole. And I see that as a significant challenge for the works. We're absolutely working at incredible pace in this organisation. I think credit to Gordon and his team for what's been achieved, because the content of his letter to Mark Hodgson is within 6 months of the letter that came from him in the first place, is a monumental achievement. It's amazing what's happened, the rate of progress. So I don't think we should let this moment pass without actually giving credit to Gordon and his team for what's been achieved.
Thank you, Simon. I see agreement with that point, and I apologise for not making that as well. That we should record in the minutes that our comments are in no way underselling the great achievements that have been made and the progress that's been made so far. I think in conclusion, other than to thank the Chief Executive and Angela, all the proposals in the paper that you've asked the committee to be engaged in, we welcome. And because of the so many moving parts, we also look to officers to use their judgment if they need to reflex the order or the nature of the engagement that they've set out based on circumstances. Thank you. I don't know whether any final comments from the Chief Executive, or are we happy to leave it there? No, I'm grateful for you making the time, and I think it's important both for the public and for the committee, Gordon, that you join us on these occasions so we can get it when you're in full flow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right. We now move on to risk, which is item 6, the review of the corporate risk register and the risk register improvements. And as many colleagues will know, there was a training session which we attended online a while ago, and there's another one come in the new year on risk appetite. And I particularly asked that it would be about how lessons on how one can present the information in a digestible way, which is a challenge because of the complexity of the subject. And with that introduction, Chris Bolton, would you like to introduce?
Yeah, happily, Chair. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Nice to talk to you again. So this paper is around noting that the training's been undertaken, as Chair already mentioned, on the 21st, and also to note that there's some planned risk appetite training, particularly concentrating on how the risk information is reported to the committee as well. Also, the paper is to note that the full risk register has been provided this time, and also there's an accompanying narrative of the top 5 risks and some of the mitigations. So I'll briefly quickly run through some of the background. So the corporate risk register is populated by individual project risk assessments and directorate risk registers, and it's reviewed at least monthly by the executive team of the combined authority at the Performance and Risk Committee. So any risks that arise in between these monthly meetings, they're escalated at the next executive team meeting or park meeting. We mentioned previously at the last meeting as well, the highlight reports. The risk registers now have also recognised owners for the risks and dates for their implementation, as well as the proximity of risks, and also some detail around the direction of travel or trends. So briefly, Chair, the top 5 risks, I won't go into detail, it's all there in the paper, but the top 5 risks in the register are related to future funding, a strategy gap, the future viability of the combined authority, governance, the value for money risk relating to governance, and inflation. As the committee has already recognised and discussed this morning, 4 of the sort of big 5 risks are related to the improvement plan. Lastly, I won't go into detail on the mitigations. I'm sure we'll talk about some of those in a moment. The risk owners should be on the call. If they're not, I'm happy to answer best that I can, or go away and get a fuller answer for the committee. But also there's a sort of trend column has been added to the risk register, given the discussion from the last Audit and Governance Committee. 4 of the 5 risks are related to the improvement plan, and as we just mentioned on the last item to do with the improvement plan, there's only been reporting for the first month, October, so the trends there just kept the same. I think much more detail and progress against the improvement plans will come forward over the next couple of months. The last one, which was inflation, the trend has gone up there, mainly related to the fact that inflation's gone up. So again, that's been changed as per direction. I'm sort of happy to sort of discuss in a bit more detail, Chair, or if there's any questions related to the paper, the risk register.
Thank you, Chris. Colleagues, we're asked to note the training and the planned training on risk appetite, and note the risk register and its accompanying narrative. My apologies for my coughing fit. Do anybody have comments on this developed way of reporting to us? I'd be grateful. Graham, did you?
No, Chair. I'm grateful to Joe for sending through the spreadsheet of the document, because in the printed version, as I copied it, I couldn't read all of the information from sort of pages. The issues log from pages 44 onwards, I got into a muddle with. So I'm grateful that I've got the full spreadsheet to look through. It looks extremely comprehensive to me, and I've got no particular comments. Thank you.
I would appreciate the spreadsheet because I can't read this document, so that's a risk. Can't reach page 36, Jack.
Don't you? Oh, you mean that the spreadsheet's too small? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chris. And I know. Oh, sorry.
Well, the spreadsheet is fine. You just have to zoom in because it's so detailed. But in the PDF, which is online, pages 44 onwards get a bit muddled because the formatting gets confused when a spreadsheet is converted to a PDF.
Okay. I think that's you made great progress, Chris. We're never going to get there, but this is much more focusing our minds on an understanding of what we could expect, like the top risks. We're going to discuss in the training any other ways of presenting the spreadsheets which might be more usable to the person who's not doing this full time. I think I would only add if in addition to the top 5, if future reports could say, have there been any new risks or any risks that have dropped off overall, and any significant movement in the top 5, I think that would help balance, give a richer picture. But otherwise, I recognise how much work goes into trying to translate this into something which is meaningful for not just for the audit committee, but for managers generally. And it's good to see the progress that's been made. So thank you. We now move on to item 7, which is draft financial strategies, which we've had a bit of a setback, I think, because not all the changes have appeared marked, but I'll hand over to Rob Emery to take us through.
Yes, apologies for that, committee. There was a mistake with the appendices, and the non-track changes version were attached twice rather than one with track changes and one with not. Given, while the changes are fairly minor, it's basically just an annual update, given that it's fairly difficult for you to understand the changes without that track changes. I would suggest that given there is a meeting in January, this could be deferred till then, which wouldn't impact its adoption by the CA board in March, if members would prefer to take that approach.
Would that be for all the documents?
Yeah, it would cover the 3 strategies and the MRP statement.
Do we have a view?
Well, we've got quite a lot on the agenda for January, so I think I'd do it now.
Okay. So can you draw our attention then to the things? And if there's any doubt in people's minds after that, we might ask for some of it to be returned. Go on.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for a reminder to anyone who's not looked at these in a year, the strategies are there, the capital strategy, treasury management and investment strategies are there to set out at a fairly high level the authority's approach to investing its spare cash balances in order to minimise the risk of having large amounts of cash just sitting in a bank account, and how we invest our capital funds into projects to contribute to the authority's goals in the long term. And alongside that, it sets key performance indicators that you're reported back to on, so that we can track and you can keep us on track to make sure we're operating in line with those policies that have been agreed. There are no fundamental changes to these policies relative to the ones that are currently in place. The changes are almost entirely narrative and just updating the figures for the new budget year. The one change that's been driven by external factors is around the liability benchmark. This is something that we had in place already as an optional requirement. This year it is now an absolute requirement from SIPA that we report to you on a liability benchmark. That's on page 81 of the agenda pack for anyone who wants to have a look. While we do have to include it, its primary purpose is to indicate give you an early warning if the organisation is taking on an unsustainable level of debt. Given that the combined authority currently has no debt and no plans to take on debt, it's probably of relatively little interest to us as an organisation, but it is there as a requirement. Other than that, the updates are entirely rolling forward the numbers for the new year. The one area where there's a relatively large change to a threshold due to these changes is on the liquidity risk indicator, which is page 81. Thank you, John. Where we've taken this down from 25 million to 15 million. So this indicator is a minimum threshold of the amount of cash we have to have available to keep the organisation cash flow running over a 3-month period. For the past year or two, we've had very large capital programs around our energy hub retrofit programs. Those currently come to an end. One did in September. The next current phase finishes in March 2023. Without those, we have a significantly smaller forecast spend over the next year, and thus keeping £25 million available in cash is more than we'd likely require. By reducing that down, it allows that 10 million to be invested in longer term treasury management investments, which in general have a higher yield. Those two are the only material updates to these strategies compared to currently adopted ones. Happy to take any questions. And if we are happy as a committee to approve these for the CA board, we will circulate a track changes version after the meeting as well.
I didn't know we were asked to approve. Briefing note, I said it's review and consider. Are we approving them or?
You don't formally approve them. The CA board adopts the policies itself. This is really a chance for the committee to express their opinion on whether they're happy with them.
I just like to be that clear that we're taking a view, we're not approving. Okay, on that basis, are there any comments?
I'm afraid, John, these are all Greek to me. Is there some independent review undertaken by other specialists, either within the committee or internal audit, external audit? And how do these compare with other equivalence authorities?
These are based on pro forma documents that we receive from our independent treasury management advisors. So we commission independent people to provide us who are experts in the area. These pro formas are basically supplied to, I think, 20 or 30% of the local authorities in the country to make sure they comply with the requirements of the SIPF codes. We then personalise them to our own limits and numbers. Beyond that, there is no specific external review.
Are they ever audited? Does an external audit?
There's no
look at them.
Specific ones. I'm not aware. Dan, there's nothing. Do RSM take any view of these? They're not specific audit on the audit plan.
No, they're not specific. However, if we were to, for example, do a treasury management audit, then we would look at them. We would look at the frequency of review, amendments that are being made. If they were, as Rob has sort of already said, they are a document that's consistent with the sector, but we would be looking for that sort of thing in our review. So, yes, they wouldn't be subject to review every year, but within an internal audit strategy, they are likely to get some coverage.
Okay, thank you. I mean, if I look back, sorry, did somebody want it? Simon, did you?
It was just a question about the loan book to local businesses, which is sitting at 41 million. It's quite a sum. And I was just wondering whether the governance arrangements oversight of those loans had been considered by internal audit, or whether there was a plan to do so. That looks to me to be the highest risk of expenditure that the Combined Authority has made, having read all of these reports.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any comment?
Yeah, so those loans are very much dominated by the outstanding housing loans that are now coming to an end. I know, because we've presented the draft budget in the last 48 hours, that figure will drop off significantly over the next couple of years. And in fact, you can see, if you're looking at the table on page 62, that the proposed limit for 23-24 is actually lower than lower than the 40 million that it was in March this year. And that's reflecting that there's no new housing loans and that the balance on those loans is decreasing over time.
My understanding is there's two loans outstanding, which are due to be repaid in May 23.
I do not know the answer off the top of my head, but I can come back to you with confirmation of that.
Okay. But do they still amount to the 41 million? I don't think they do. Is there other loans to other businesses within that bundle?
There are some significantly smaller loans to other businesses within that, yes, as the business board's portfolio includes a number of loans made instead of grant payments to companies.
It's that bit of the loan book that is of interest, I think. Yeah.
When we've looked at these things over the years, the return on investment has also been an issue. Where are we now now that we've entered the jaws of inflation?
Yes, there certainly is a silver lining there. Our current year forecast for investment income has gone from when the MTFP was set, I think in the region of £100,000 per year. We're now forecasting 1.7 million. So the interest rates we get on our treasury management investments are substantially higher than they were when we set the budget about a year ago. Of course, that should be taken in comparison to the inflation rate, which RPI in September was 12%, and our return on investments for treasury management's probably still 2 to 3% on new loans. So against inflation, we're probably making a greater real terms loss now than we were a year ago, even though the absolute income figure is significantly higher.
I always think we're on our horns of dilemma with these sort of documents because there's 60 odd pages, a third of what we've got in front of us today almost. It's never in previous years caused a concern for the committee. I think it's a shame that we didn't have the fact changes. So I think we would like the fact changes sent out after this meeting to members with the request that they come back in good time if there's any concerns which are not shared at this meeting or resolved at this meeting. We note that at some stage these documents would merit a thought for the future internal audit programs. And could we have a short note for the next meeting, not the proper January meeting, just highlighting that about the loans, the risks in that area, just to reassure members' comments. Okay. And on that basis, we'll move on. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we move on to item 8, which is subsidiary companies, and remind members that this interest stems from a minimal internal audit insurance, which is the lowest is the modern way of saying no assurances. Okay, and that we briefly had an update at our previous meeting, and this is a more considered insight as to the authority's response to the internal audit findings. Pardon me. Edwina, would you like to introduce?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, committee. As the chair has mentioned, there was minimal assurance, which was brought before this committee in the past. And at the last meeting before the committee asked for specific questions to be answered. So the questions to those answers are contained in this report, along with an update on the actions taken on the agreed action. Firstly, I'd like to apologize for an error on page 2, paragraph 3 of the report. Item IV should read, there is a deadline of November for the 4th agreed action and not the second agreed action. So please substitute the word second with 4th agreed action, 4th. Apologies for that. So if I turn to the content of the report, I'm not going to go into all the details. I would just highlight the main issues. Firstly, one is that officers are executing the agreed actions that were set out in the audit report. And these are all set out in paragraph 3 of the report. The other issue to bring to the committee's attention is that the board at its meeting, the CA board at its meeting on Wednesday, approved the establishment of a shareholder board. The shareholder board will then be responsible for the oversight of the companies. We're expecting the first meeting to take place late January, early February, and after that meeting, a further report will be brought to the board. And then the final issue that I wanted to highlight is contained in paragraph 4 of the report. Paragraph 4 basically answers the questions that were posed by this committee to officers at the last meeting. And those questions are basically around how many companies does the CA own, and why were those companies created in the first place, and what do those companies do? So those are the issues that I wish to highlight, and I am available for questions. Thank you, Chair.
We are being asked to note progress against the items identified by the internal auditor. And can I just confirm there will be a follow-up internal audit on this item? Dan?
Not that I'm aware of. There'll be general sort of yearly audits anyway, by internal audits, just making sure that governance are in place and followed correctly. But I'm not aware of any scheduled for the next few months or in the next year, even on this issue.
Thank you. Dan, I had some recollection you were just doing a follow-up.
So within the internal audit programme, we've got a review scheduled for Q4 where we were going to do a deep dive into one of the subsidiary companies. Because I think what the plan was initially was the review that you're obviously receiving an update on those actions. That was if you like, an overarching review of the subsidiary company arrangement, and then we were going to look at future internal audit plans, taking a deep dive into sort of an individual company at a time. So there is some time in Q4 for that. The other thing that I would say is we've got a follow-up allocation for the end of March. I'm not sure we've scoped that review there yet, but what that would do is select a sample of actions that officers are saying have been implemented, and then we would test those and look for evidence to sort of support that statement of implementation. So there's the potential to incorporate some of these actions in that follow-up review. if the committee would wish so.
Thank you. Now, comments from colleagues, members?
Later on in our report, there's a section in the accounts about subsidiary companies, which this audit covers, joint ventures and associates. Do some of these recommendations and actions apply equally to those joint ventures, or is that a separate issue completely?
No, so my understanding of the internal audit is that the actions apply to all the 6 companies listed in this report, which would include the special purpose vehicles and joint ventures. They all need to have robust governance processes, and my view is it applies equally to all.
Edwina, I think your paper refers to 6 companies, and page 143 lists 9 or so companies. So there are some others which are like Smart Manufacturing, Ascendal, Medtech Accelerator Limited, which I don't think are covered by the actions you've mentioned so far.
Yes, you're correct. So the actions cover the 6 companies that are listed in my report. Some of them are special purpose vehicles as well. Out of those 6, so there are joint ventures and there's a special purpose vehicle as well. The other 3 that you mentioned, they're not included in my report.
Was the question, are they similar animal? You know, are they from a combined authority point of view?
I would have to look at those companies, but I don't believe they are. These are the 6 companies, are companies that CA own shares in or jointly own. But I don't know if someone else wants to speak to.
Rob's got a comment, please.
Yeah, so there's a difference between those 2 classes of companies. The 6 that are referred to in Edwina's reports are ones where the combined authority has a significant role in the operation of those companies. So we appoint board members, we make decisions in terms of their ongoing operations on a day-to-day basis, and we also tend to provide services such as banking and things like that to them. The other 3, Smart Manufacturing, Ascendal and Medtech, are investments made by the business board, although the CPCA is the legal owner of any shares. But those are ones where we don't operate control. We're effectively a silent partner in those businesses in that we've provided funding through that means rather than grant, but it's with an expert in the field in which those companies are operating, and they make all the operational decisions in those companies. They're also of a significantly smaller value than most of the ones where we're operating them primarily through the combined authority. That said, they do have governance requirements and reporting requirements up to the combined authority, and those are regularly reviewed.
Sorry, are they regularly reviewed? Will they be reviewed by the new board? Because isn't part of the learning process as to how these things are done? Is there an argument for saying that they should be put in under the remit of the new board?
Entirely on the fly, in my opinion, yes. I would say, given that we are a shareholder, it would form part of their work. It would be a much smaller part of their work, again, because we take a much less active role in those companies.
Right, sorry, any other comments? I'm just thinking, hang on. Okay, so the next action, so you form the shareholder board, that's been done, you said? Been approved?
Yeah, it's been approved.
And when are we likely to have a report from their first meeting in timeline terms?
We're hoping that the first meeting takes place late January, early February. There is some work to be done before the company can be formed. Each political party needs to nominate somebody. and all of that sort of work needs to go on. And then hopefully we have the first meeting of that board. And if that happens January, early February, then the report will be coming to the next Audit and Governance meeting after that. Yeah,
Okay.
in March.
All right. That seems reasonable. I think we need, so we look to the March meeting. We need a report in the March meeting, regardless of whether the board has met. I think it be useful for the committee to see the terms of reference for the board at that meeting. The terms of reference need to.
Sorry, Chair, if I can, in the report, there is a link to the terms of reference, but if you want.
Okay, all right, I stand corrected then. I think that was mentioned earlier by a colleague.
Yeah.
I missed tapping on that link. I will now do so, encourage members to do that. Let me know if there's any questions about it. But I sometimes I think the eye brushes over the link. So I request officers when they link which is germane, perhaps just to repeat it in the pack rather than rely on the link. Okay, but we need to include in that terms of reference the other three entities. Was it three? Yeah. For the shareholder board. And I'd also welcome, we did agree last year an amendment to our terms of reference, the committee, in regard to these companies. In the report in March, could we have an analysis as to where our responsibilities vis-a-vis the board, so that we can cross-check that we are meeting our obligations, or if we need to do something more, that we understand what that is. Does that make sense? Okay, are we happy,
yes,
happy to leave that then to another time? And separately, the follow-up work, I'd ask officers to, when they agree what the follow-up works of, as described by the internal auditor, is done towards the end of the year, consider whether they should include some items from their findings from the minimal insurance. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. We now have the item 9, the draft statement of accounts and annual governance statement. I'll ask the finance.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. At the July committee meeting, the committee was advised that due to illness, the combined authority was not able to publish the draft financial statements by the deadline for this year of the 1st of August. The committee did, however, received a draft narrative report and annual governance statement. The deadline for final accounts publications, publication of the accounts, was extended this year to the 30th of November. And unfortunately, due to the delay in preparing the draft accounts, and also due to our external auditors having resourcing issues, the draft accounts have not yet been audited. And we have been advised that the auditors will not be in a position to conduct the audit until at least January of next year. We have, however, published the draft accounts on the Combined Authority's website, along with the notice of the exercise of public rights, which invites members of the public to ask the external auditor questions on the accounts for a period of 30 days. And the notice also sets out the rights of the public to take copies of the accounts and of certain other related documents. Members are invited to ask questions on the draft accounts as set out in Appendix 1, and comments and suggestions will be taken into account when the final version of the accounts is brought back to the committee for final approval once the audit has been substantially completed. Just would point out one change to the version of the accounts that you have seen in your pack. So since the publication of these papers, there's been one or two presentational adjustments. The most significant of which is on the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, where the business and skills and election figures are shown the wrong way round. So that has been corrected on the version which is now published on the website. But we have Rob Emery here, and also Ian Pantling and Harbam Odedra online to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues? Questions?
I'm just trying to get to it. The comprehensive income and expenditure statement, I'd also got confused about the election costs, thinking £41 million to hold an election seems an awful lot. Just to clarify again what it really is.
Yes, apologies. That is that's the error that I was referring to. So it's basically those two lines, the business and skills lines and election lines should be swapped around. So the election cost 965,000.
Thanks, much more reasonable price. And so a couple of other relatively minor comments, but just to show that I've been through it. The Chief Executive's office costs on page 39 is shown as increasing quite significantly from 4.1 million to 5.6 million. Is there a reason for that? Similarly, on page 159, the mayoral allowance has gone up from 75,000 to 81,000, but I was disappointed to see that John's allowance as chair of Audit and Governance doesn't change at all, and neither does the business board chair's allowance. On page 161, it lists the compulsory redundancies, and I just wonder whether you are able to share more information about why those have happened when we're so short of staff. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll try and pick up a couple of those. May have to refer to colleagues about the Chief Executive Office costs, but certainly the mayoral allowance that is determined by the Employment Committee, Remuneration Committee. If, as you may be aware, that the previous mayor had an initial allowance which was subject to inflation, but chose not to increase his allowance or to take that inflationary rise. The latest remuneration committee has when the original the newly elected mayor came into power, then the allowance was adjusted for that inflation calculation, and that's recently been reviewed by a remuneration committee recently. So that is now subject year on year to an inflationary increase, which is determined by the committee itself.
So just on that one, an inflationary increase, is that based on an independent, completely independent remuneration panel, as it is in perhaps other local authorities, or is it related to cost of living increases awarded to staff, or inflation, or how is it done?
Yeah. So for there are different methodologies used by combined authorities to calculate increases in allowance. For for our combined authority, it's based on retail price index, so it's fixed to the official inflationary rates. I think going forward, I'm not sure if Jodie's on the call, but I think there was talk of changing that so that it is brought in line with the cost of living increases that are provided to staff. But we'll check on what the final decision was on that.
And just some of the other ones, why has poor old John not got an increase? And can you tell us any more about the compulsory redundancies?
Yes, unfortunately, I'm not sure that the chair of the Audit and Governance Committee is allowances subject to inflation, but I'm sure we can. Again, I'll speak to Jodie Townsend about that. In terms of the compulsory redundancies, there are 4 that are included in the statements. And those relate to a number of settlement agreements that were considered and approved by the board, the main combined authority board, in exempt session. So probably unwise for me to comment on those at this time. But given that the circumstances that led to those 4 individuals leaving the organisation happened substantively in this financial year, we have made, and under the advice of the external auditors, we've accrued for those costs, even though they were actually that the payments were made in the current the new financial year.
Did that answer all the questions?
I'm not sure if Rob was able to do a bit of research whilst the other questions were being asked about the chief executive area.
Slightly, which is to say of that line is the entire staffing budget for the combined authority. So the underlying question, I think, is why did staffing expenditure increase between 2021 and 21-22? I don't know off the top of my head, but I can bring back a breakdown explanation of why they've gone up.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments?
Just one. There's a statement about what's been delivered during the year, but could you shed some light on what could have been delivered but wasn't delivered against the programme? Because that relates back to the question of capacities to deliver and whether or not looking forward we will see greater delivery, because my colleague says this authority is about delivery, and we've got a lot of money sitting in the treasury, which is money that is for delivery. So that's the question.
Okay, I'm not sure if that's specifically to do with the financial statements, but in terms of that, obviously the I mean, you see the accounts as they are set out formally here. The review of the performance of the organisation on a project by project basis and by directorate is taken to board in regular budget update reports on a quarterly basis, or sorry, each board meeting. And at the end of the financial year, we take an outturn position. It's true to say that there has been, in the last financial year, some slippage, in particular in the capital programme. It's not unusual. I think the combined authorities slippage rates are very consistent with other local authorities, and indeed a lot of what we do is delivered through our delivery partners, which tend to be the constituent councils. There has been some concern, which has been raised by members about the extent of the slippage and the reasons for that. And that is the subject of an internal audit review, which I understand is coming to, it's in progress at the moment and is due to report in January.
Any other? I'm conscious that the external auditor needs to leave in 10 minutes. Are you able to, would you like to say something?
Thank you. Don't wish to pick you up on semantics, John, but I would refute the comment that we have resource issues. We are resource constrained, and clearly missing a slot in our phasing timetable has an impact on when we're able to come in and do the audit, but I would refute the sentence about having resource issues.
We'll ask you to talk about that separately rather than are there any other comments you'd like to make about when you will be doing, when we will get your opinion? Okay. Thank you. I've just got one question on the, is there any other questions? Right, on the left, maybe some help.
Sorry, it was just I've got some further clarity on the query around the change in cost of services. There's two elements to it. One is direct staffing cost increase and the other is changes in the pension fund. So due to pension fund asset value changes, it's gone up by 700,000. So that's totally outside the combined authority's control. It's controlled by market forces on our pension fund. The underlying change in staffing cost is £700,000 between the 2 years. And as I said, I can bring back a further breakdown of that by email to the committee.
I'm sure that's exactly right. Things like the pension fund, doesn't that affect other lines as well, though, like corporate overheads and don't know, strategy and delivery and things like that, where numbers seem to be going down rather than up so significantly? But I was expecting you to come back and say there have been a lot of vacancies in the chief executive's office and we have filled them. Not that staffing costs have increased due to inflation and pension costs have gone up, but
so that the way the combined authority reports its staffing costs is that they are all reported within the chief exec's line there. It's not just the chief exec's office. So that is the cost of all staff to the authority.
Right. Who signs the annual government statement? There's two signatures, but they're blank.
Yeah, sorry. In previous years, it's been the chief executive and the chair of the Audit and Governance Committee.
Okay, but I think I'm going to get further advice because I don't remember that.
Apologies, I've just been advised that it was it should be the chief executive and the mayor rather than the.
I'm much happy with that. Okay, thank you. So when will we see this again? We will wait now until we have the external audit result. Is that right? So we just therefore note that it will reappear on the agenda once we have the opinion from the external auditor. We were asked to note, which we've done, and you undertook the action that where appointments are not inflation linked, you'd have the CPCA would have a look at that. Yeah, and that's not, I didn't know about this, and it's really, it's the business board question, which is more relevant. I declare an interest as far as I'm concerned, because that's quite separate. But I think from a point of view that having a consistent policy, we got now that the jaws of inflation have reopened, having a consistent policy on these matters is sensible, whatever that policy might be. Okay. Are we happy to move on to item 10, which is the internal audit progress report?
Thank you, Chair. So if I can take you, I think it's page 223 on the pack, but headed up key messages. So as you can see, we've finalised 2 further reports relating to the 21-22 programme. That was the original core plan. We have also finalised a further review relating to 21-22 activity. That was an additional audit that was commissioned around community land trusts. And a further revised draft has been issued on the government procurement card expenditure review as well. So that is the current position. So with the exception of that government procurement card review, everything is now finalised from our 21-22 programme. In relation to 22-23 delivery, we've finalised the data protection report. The summary is on your agenda today. Further draft has been issued on risk management, and there's 2 further reviews that are in progress, with the core financials review commencing next week. The remainder of the reviews are scheduled in for Q4, and I've just highlighted at the bottom of that page that we've been asked to postpone the succession planning. So it had already been pushed back into Q4, but we've now actually been asked to postpone that review to the next financial year's plan. So we're in discussions with officers about what will replace that audit, but that review will come through in the plan that comes to your March meeting. If I may, for the moment, just skip over section 2. I will come back to that because obviously that's got the detail of the 4 final reports. But Appendix A, it just provides that summary. So that's the remaining reports. You can see the 3 in bold there are the 3 finals and the revised draft there that's been issued. And then Appendix B just gives you a full summary of the current year's programme of work. It's all in line with the timelines that have been agreed, but I note that it is somewhat a back-ended plan again. So I think the committee's raised an issue around this before. What I will be looking to do is when we come forward with the 23-24 programme in March, we will look to have a lot more of an even spread on a quarterly basis of next year's reviews. Nothing to report on Appendix C. I've mentioned the succession planning review, so I won't go into that into any detail. So perhaps just pause there, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions, but I will come back to section 2, which is obviously the detail of the main 4 reports. So are there any questions other than section 2 on the report?
in case Dan's not coming back to this, but could you just elaborate a bit more about what's happening to your expenses audit and the timescale for completing that? It's mentioned in a few places, but not specifically what the next stage is. So on page 227, it says the draft reports were issued on the 12th of May, and then another draft one on the 28th of September. So, with more information to be confirmed.
Yes, so revised draft has just been issued. It's just whilst whilst the mayor's off, that's just holding the finalisation of that report up at the moment.
So that means, considers the mayor's back in office, that report cannot be finalised.
Correct.
Thank you.
Well, I thought we had given or delegated powers had been passed to the deputy mayor to act in the mayor's absence. So I would have thought business continues, and for something like this should continue.
Chair, if I can assist. So yes, the report can't be finalised because there are some responses that are required from the mayor as individually. That's not a power that can be exercised by the deputy mayor acting in his place, because these are investigations into a certain issue, and the deputy mayor cannot answer for the mayor. This is why it's been paused for now until the mayor can respond individually.
Thank you. So we will wait whenever the mayor is back in office, as this is information that he has personally.
Okay, well, we'll wait for him to come back, and we wish him well. I just assumed that there was some generic findings and actions that could be finalised in his absence, but maybe not.
I think best left there would be my view.
This may be a very naive question, so prepare yourself for naivety. It seems to me there's just this continuous stream of internal audits, and I think this just might reflect, I don't know whether this is just standard operating procedure or whether this reflects the fact that this is a relatively new organisation that's engaged in a whole series of quite novel programs and projects for which there is very little in the way of precedent. And as a result, what may have happened is that, if you like, the governance arrangements around financial management and scrutiny and so on have been concocted as they've gone along, because there may well have been grant funders, rules, requirements, and so on and so forth, and they've been put into the hands of third parties or the products of partnerships. So it makes it look like a very complex picture overall. So looking forward, is the assurance framework and all the other arrangements that have been put in place now, is that going to create a better platform, a better boilerplate for the financial management of projects and programs, so that we don't see such a heavy internal audit program, a requirement for such a heavy internal audit?
I think what I made reference earlier, for example, just on the subsidiary governance reviews that we did. I think that was somewhat unique in terms of it being sort of very early on in our tenure as the new internal auditors, that we said, for example, we would do an overarching review to understand what the indeed what sort of companies are in place, what the governance arrangements are at a very sort of holistic level, and then start to sort of drill down. But some of the other reviews that you've got on the agenda today, so something like payroll, that is not, I would argue that should be business as usual. Likewise, something like the IT control framework, you know, obviously the organisation relies heavily on IT. That is a fairly standard review. I think the Community Land Trust review was something that was somewhat unique, but again, something like data protection is a you know, for me, that is a sort of a sensible. It's a high risk area. There's been change in that area in the last few years, and that's eminently sensible. Whether you're a sort of a new organisation or indeed a very established organisation, to want to see internal audit coverage in that place. So sorry, I'm not sure if I fully answered your question, but I think the other thing that I would say is obviously, we did do a risk management audit in our first year of being appointed, and that was a negative opinion. So we felt that there needed to be enhancements to that risk management framework. And obviously the committee will appreciate that our coverage is driven by risk. So we need to have a robust risk management framework, strategic risk, to then drive our programme of work. So again, with some of the enhancements that are being made by officers to that framework, that should hopefully drill through in terms of future years' internal audit work.
I mean, I don't think that the volume would change a lot. Hopefully the findings will be more encouraging, because it's how sad. I've been on umpty audit committees over the years. I've never come across such the negative findings that we've had, and that's partly HR was an early one, which had no assurance, but that was the language. So it's partly of the settling down, partly the complexity, but it's hygiene factors in the end. I mean, the other when I was on the police audit committee years ago, they never had anything but perfect, which I didn't believe either. Actually, I think I commend the officers in using internal audit to try and put a light into areas which they're uncomfortable with as well.
No, sorry, I overlooked that. I think that is a very fair comment, that obviously you're not going to drive value from an internal audit service if you don't point us in areas of significant risk and of strategic risk. And indeed, that's what we have done and worked with officers when we're drafting the programme of work, to direct our coverage into those areas where officers indeed have concerns, or where there's significant change, or where there's developing areas and programmes and projects. So that's obviously it's getting the balance right, that you don't put us in every single known area of risk, and then you don't get the right balance of the programme. But yes, I think that's a fair point by the chair, that just to remind ourselves that it is very much sort of risk driven, and some of those risks areas, as your risk register will show, are not fully under control or not at your target score yet. So you might have some adverse findings from our work.
Other comments on the pause moment before? Sorry, Edwina, did you want to speak? Sorry, I didn't notice.
No, thank you, Chair. I was just going to make a comment that the number of internal audits, I think it's sort of usual from my experience. So these things kind of, you know, flow in ebbs and flows. With risk, there are usually 3 layers of protection. So there is, you know, the CA itself, there'll be internal audits and then external audits. And this is normal. We should have a regular program of checks. And as been said earlier, we should be highlighting to our external auditors areas of concern. So whilst it may seem that this is a lot, the next year might be lower, but another year it might be a high number. I think it's very important that we have these internal audits regularly so that you as a committee can be assured that things are working properly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do you want to move on?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think what I did just want to pick up on just in section 2 was just the 2 reviews. So I think in our annual report, you've already seen reference to the IT framework follow-up, but I mentioned that because obviously that was originally a minimal assurance opinion. So this is our second follow-up in this area. So I just wanted to really draw the committee's attention to the fact that we followed this up again. So we'd originally made or agreed 10 management actions. 3 had already been fully implemented at our first follow-up review. So this second follow-up review looked at the remaining 7 actions. And as you can see, we've still got 4 of those actions that are still a work in progress. One of the medium priority actions was recategorized down to a low because we could see progress had been made there. So I think that is something that the committee will want to see come back through, just in terms of an update on the progress that's been made, because that was originally, as I say, minimal assurance. And obviously IT is a fundamental part of any organisation's control framework. So I touch upon that. I think the other one that I just wanted to touch upon was the one report that we finalised. So that's on data protection on page 226 of the PDF pack. Now, whilst that was an advisory review in nature, it did have a number of significant issues that we'd identified within that review. And I think what I would just say to the committee is that that won't in isolation result in a qualified opinion, but it is obviously our first review of 22-23. And as I've stated there in the paper, there were a number of significant issues identified in that piece of work. So I flag that because, again, I think it's something that we may want to revisit, and the committee just may want some assurance at the latter part of the year that progress has been made to implement the actions that have been agreed from that review.
Thank you. This data protection point, would we be looking to you to give us a view towards the end of the year, or are we looking to officers?
So I'm just checking actually sorry, just one second. I'm just checking the implementation dates that I've got within the full report. So some of those implementation dates are 31st of December, and some of the actions in the action plan that we got back have already been marked as completed. So the reason why I was just checking that was we've got that follow-up audit planned for March of next year. So we could also incorporate the findings from this review where the implementation dates that officers have proposed have passed, to give you some independent assurance.
Okay, I think that'd be very helpful, and it's clarified my mind earlier about the trading companies. So I do think those follow-ups need to focus on the minimal assurance reports. And if there's any more resource available in the allocation, then you could have a look at some of the others. But I think those are the 2 that, is it just the 2 minimal assurance reports, or is it 3?
No, I think it's those 2 that,
okay.
Should be of focus.
That's the priority, I think, looking around for your follow-up work. Okay. Right. Did you want? Sorry?
Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to make a comment about the data protection audit. As has been confirmed, quite a number of them have been completed. There are a few that are outstanding, but there is a report coming to this committee and it's already scheduled for January, I believe. That is coming to the committee, so we will provide an update to this committee in January.
Thank you for reminding us. Thank you. Okay. Do you want to move on, Dan?
Yes, in terms of the second paper that I've got within my papers, this was the annual report for 21-22, and what I've agreed with the chair is that actually that's going to come back to your second January meeting, to the one more towards the end of January, because I noticed once the papers had been issued that actually there was an action item from your July meeting that the committee had requested that we included some further commentary within the annual report regarding the incidence and significance of a negative opinion. My apologies, I'd omitted to insert a paragraph. I have now done that. I've reissued the annual report, but that was only done this week, and it was after your paper deadline. So all I would say about this report is you've had this at your previous meeting. It's been updated for the 3 reports that have been finalised since that meeting. Those are the only changes. The opinion will stay the same. That will not change. But for completeness, we propose bringing the final version of this back to your January meeting.
Thank you very, very much, Dan. But I think it is for completeness. We should be able to discuss what's in the rest of the report whilst we're all gathered today. David.
Thank you, Chairman. Dan, on page 237 of our pack, and it's page 4 of the paper, the advisory reviews, and it comes back to this government procurement card. I thought we were in a position, and we've just heard that that's in draft until the mayor's back and has had a chance to comment on it. But this says the deep dive report has been issued with 7 high, 2 medium and 1 low priority actions. Are we talking about 2 different reports into the government procurement card, or which is right? Has it been issued, or is it?
No, so you're quite correct. That report has been issued. At draft stage, it has been issued with those numbers and categories of actions, but because it is still at a draft stage and we are still awaiting formal sign-off from indeed officers and the mayor in terms of the content. So what I've tried to do is just be completely open and transparent in my annual report to say there were some significant weaknesses to the control framework relating to the procurement cards within that review. There are 7 high, 2 medium, 1 low priority action that have been proposed, but we're just not in a position where that is actually a final report at this moment in time.
Well, I think any member of public reading this would then be expecting to be able to find it on a website somewhere. If you say it has been issued, maybe it needs to say the draft report or something, but anybody reading this cold would think it's available somewhere.
Well,
or is it available somewhere?
No, it's not indeed. So I've referenced it on that page you're referring to in brackets and in capital letters. I've referred to the fact that that's draft. No other report in that table is in draft, and indeed the committee has seen the conclusions and the findings from every single one of the other reports that are in final. It's just standard protocol that what we don't do is bring a draft report in front of a committee, because for the very reason that it is still draft and the findings have the potential to change, and the actions, should we be presented with any evidence that we weren't presented with during the field work. So I understand the frustration that we're sort of past the year end and that's still not been finalised, but I'm just being open and transparent. That's where we are with that review.
Thank you very much. I'll leave it there. Do you want to say more about your opinion? No, sorry, we're going to have a, sorry, get my mind back on track. We will get it for completeness, a final internal audit opinion, which includes the comment or the insight regarding the significance of such a negative opinion. But in all other respects, you don't envisage it will change. Therefore, this is an opportunity, as it was on our agenda, to do the comment and questioning phase. Are there any comments, questions? No. Right. Would you just tell us what will be in the completeness version regarding the significance of a minimal or a negative opinion?
Yes, I mean, in effect, I've included some commentary around the fact that within the public sector, qualified or negative opinions in terms of risk governance and internal control arrangements are not completely unheard of, but they are very much in the minority. I've added some sort of further context to say that there are a range of factors where a negative opinion becomes more prevalent, and some of the key themes that I've just sort of laid out are where there's significant amount of change, where there are underdeveloped control frameworks or fairly new control frameworks, where there's significant staff turnover and or vacant posts. I think the other bit of context that I put in there is that, stating the obvious, but they should be taken very seriously. And I think importantly, it's the action tracking process that this committee, I think that's this committee's role in terms of ensuring that there is an effective action tracking process, so that this committee sees regular reports from officers that said, here's the series of reports and actions that have been agreed. This is where we are in implementing those actions. So I think that's the other thing, to sort of bring it back to sort of this committee and your sort of terms of reference and role. I see that as being around ensuring that you see evidence that there's an effective action tracking process in place, and that we can see that progress is being reported positively by officers around the actions that we've agreed.
I mean, that raises an interesting point as to how do we get that assurance. I've been on other audit committees where at each time we've met, there's been a list of actions still outstanding that have gone beyond their their action date. I'm not clear in my mind where we get that overview now. Is that something that internal audit do, or is that something that officers do?
No, so typically that's an officer function, and then what we do is within our programme include what we call a follow-up review. And it might be appropriate next year, for example, to have 2 follow-up reviews so that you can get a half-yearly update from us. And what that review does is takes a sample of the actions and says, okay, this is indicated as having been implemented. Can I have the evidence, please? But what it also allows the committee to do is see at the periods of the year that it's reported, how many actions are beyond their due date. Because with respect, if something's still within its due date, that's not as much of a concern. It's those that have passed the due date.
Exactly so. We don't want to keep looking at the animal. Is a way for when you bring your report on your follow-up review, that comes alongside a summary from officers on the list of any actions which are overdue their delivery date. Because it is very important, a culture within officers. This isn't about trying to please the auditors. They've got to be realistic in the timelines they set for whatever the remedial action is, taking account of workload and significance. So we should be encouraging officers to give realistic deadlines, and unless it's materially dangerous to wait to that, which would be the advice you could give, we want realistic deadlines which are met. So could we ask then, in the follow-up review, it also has a list from officers of what they understand as the items that are not been done by their due date?
Yeah, just in terms of the internal process, then we do have an internal audit action tracker, and that is held by the PMO under Chris Bolton, who was here earlier on. So that goes to our regular performance and risk committee, which is an internal officer committee. That's held every 2 months or so. And that report is taken regularly to there, but that's something that we could perhaps at the in a future meeting we can bring that with that.
But
So
I think
it does
we all
exist, I guess.
agreed on that.
Yeah.
Point, Chair. It's not unusual for year end events after the year end to be commented on in annual reports. And I was just wondering whether you were considering reporting on end of year developments, because to leave it hanging there based on the 1st of June letter isn't really the full picture, is it? When you consider the letter that the interim chief executive has sent to the external auditor to demonstrate that there's been considerable work undertaken to address the key concerns, and they're all under paragraph headings in bold set out in the letter. So I think it just might be more factually correct to refer to those post-year developments.
If I may, I'd be happy to do that. So no problem at all. I think the only other commentary that I would make in relation to that is my understanding is that, if not all, a significant number of the actions and progress that has been made has actually been in the 22-23 financial year. So notwithstanding that, I will update for that commentary, because I think you're right, that would be helpful. I think what would be of more interest to me is to say, in terms of my 22-23 opinion, that's when I really get under the, that's when I need to look at that information and the work of the improvement board and the work that has been described today and has been on the agenda today, in terms of seeing the direction of travel in terms of some of those governance concerns and indeed the actions that have been taken. But I think for completeness, that's a good suggestion. So I can do that, and that can come back to your January meeting.
Okay, thank you. That's very, very helpful. Any other comments? Okay, so we'll see the final at the January meeting, and we really should, it's a matter of completeness unless there's anything untoward comes to people's minds in the meantime. Thank you very much. So dates of the next meetings are 13th of January, which is that extra meeting, and please confirm, if you haven't already done so, that your availability to the team, and then the 27th of January, both here at Pathfinder House. Members may not meet again unless Edwina is successful in lassoing a date for the this year, I meant, not ever, for the hearing panel training. But officers we may or may not meet. So I'd just like to thank everybody for this calendar year's effort and wish everybody a great mince pie and festive season. Thank you very much. The lights are turning out.